Okay, I'll give a couple of seconds for people to get in and find a seat.
Thanks, Jim.
So, good morning, everybody. Thanks for logging in to this latest in our NMIS Insights series. This morning's is a joint venture between NMIS and colleagues at Skills Development Scotland on meta skills and future-proofing the workforce. Our main speaker today will be Lewis Gale, Skills Development Scotland. I'll give a very short introduction on NMIS overall to start with. Then at the end, I'll give an overview of the Manufacturing Skills Academy, but in between we'll have the main event on meta skills from Lewis. Before we get into the session, some housekeeping. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel. Your microphones and webcams will be turned off during the session to avoid background noise. You can type your questions throughout the session via the chat tool, and we'll allocate some time at the end for both Lewis and I to answer any questions you have. Please use the hashtag NMIS Insights for any questions on Twitter. And if you'd be so good as to take some time to complete our survey at the end of the seminar, that'd be great. So probably for those of you who aren't quite aware yet what NMIS is, an obvious question is, what is the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland? It's a group of industry-led research and development facilities where we bring together research, industry and the public sector together to transform skills, productivity and innovation, directing Scotland to become a global leader in advanced manufacturing. The key element of this particular vision is industry-led. That's massively important because we don't want to be providing solutions that nobody needs. The key word is transform. The project needs to be transformational in nature. It's got to take us where we want to get to. We can't be doing anything that's already been done. And effectively, these are the aims that we expect and the strategic objectives that we have around NMIS. Increasing productivity, which is always a challenge, and reduce barriers to innovation. Stimulate investment, increase manufacturing competitiveness. Catalyse job creation, strengthen supply chain links, and that's very important from the lessons we've learned from our COVID-19 interactions. And I think particularly with the content of today, inspire and attract and equip the current and future workforces with the skills that businesses need. And we want to take a holistic approach to this and work with manufacturing businesses of all sizes in multiple sectors across Scotland. The SME cohort in particular is very important to us, and we want to try and make sure we can get as big an impact as possible within that sector. NMIS overall will be operated by the University of Strathclyde, but during the development of the project, clearly there are a lot of influential and key stakeholders. NMIS will be a national asset. So while Strathclyde will operate the facility and the ethos, it is supported by Scottish Government, Scottish Enterprise, Highland and Islands, Catapult, Skills Development Scotland, Renfrewshire Council, and the Scottish Funding Council. So we've got a wide and deep cohort of supporters and influences and stakeholders across the project. It's very important that this has a One Scotland approach. If I get in now a little to what the actual NMIS group is, in reality, you can see from the diagram here, we already have specialist centres, some of which I'm sure you'll be aware of, the Advanced Forming Research Centre in Shinnon, the Lightweight Manufacturing Centre on Westway Industrial Park, where we also have some temporary workshop space. The core elements of the building that will be developed in Shinnon will be the digital factory of the future, where we're looking to understand more and develop more the transformational manufacturing technologies required. A collaboration space, again for those SMEs that I referenced earlier, around a kind of risk-free, almost test-fail product development space, and the Manufacturing Skills Academy that, as I said, I'll talk around a little bit later after Lewis's section on meta skills. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to my colleague from Skills Development Scotland, Lewis Gale. He'll do a little introduction of himself, and we'll continue from there. Thanks, Lewis.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, thanks for having me along today to chat to you. I am Meta Skills Development Manager at Skills Development Scotland. It's a post that I've had now for, I think, about 18 months. And the main kind of focus on that is sort of taking SDS's work around the concept of Skills 4.0, which was born out of kind of how do we respond to Industry 4.0, and look at how we integrate that into the kind of apprenticeship delivery and the kind of wider skills development system to try and kind of achieve some of those aims that are kind of aligned with those of NMIS, thinking about things like how do we enable innovation through workforce development? How do we increase productivity? And ultimately the main one, how do we equip the future workforce with the skills that they need? So that's really kind of where my focus is. What I'm going to talk through today is, I think it's important, I don't know how much everybody knows about the Meta Skills program. So I think I'll begin with taking a look at kind of the why of Meta Skills. So why are we doing this? What's the program all about? Then have a look at kind of the evolution of the program as it's sort of, taken place over the past 4 years since we've been kind of looking at this. To give you a bit of kind of just idea of context and how this plays out in the real world, then I'll have a look at kind of some of the stakeholder feedback and benefits that we've had through our pilots this year. And then look at kind of how do we actually go about developing what are potentially kind of abstract concepts in the form of meta skills through our apprenticeship delivery. So that's the kind of main sort of stay of the presentation today. Jim, could we move to the next slide, please? I think we're...
Yep, I'm here. I'm attempting. I wonder, Lewis, if you've got capability at your end now.
Doesn't seem so.
I'll come out, come back in.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay, so meta skills, why? Well, as the world of work changes, so too must the workforce. It's sort of simple as that, really. I think as businesses adapt and they evolve, then skills needs are going to change also. If we think about why the world of work is changing, then it's sort of essentially various socioeconomic mega trends that are disrupting and transforming the world around us. Initially, like I said, it was kind of a look at how do we respond to technology and digital transformation, and kind of everything that sits under the umbrella of Industry 4.0. But as we've kind of gone through the program, it's become clear that that's not the only driver of change in our world today. And so even things like social demographics, climate change, and most pertinently or most kind of viscerally at the moment, the coronavirus crisis is really illustrating just how radically and quickly our economy and society can change overnight. I think all of us are probably doing different things. I think somebody's about to try and just give me a delivery. Just leave it there, thank you. The joys of working at home. So what does that mean for the workforce? Well, as the world of work changes, the workforce needs to do so as well. So as businesses adapt and evolve to these sort of catalysts for change or these drivers, then the skills needs that are required in order to cope with that are going to change also. And so it's really this capability to unlearn what you know in order to be able to relearn new ways of doing things that's going to unlock opportunities for innovation, and also allow people to upskill into new opportunities that are brought about by some of these mega trends. And if we think about technology and how that drives change, then as that becomes more embedded and integrated in the work that we do, and obviously sort of manufacturing is kind of a really good example of that, then we need to think about the human capabilities that are going to be key to unlocking the related opportunities within that. So a really interesting sort of comment that somebody gave to me in one of these presentations recently was, actually, we have all the technology there already to support Industry 4.0, and what we now need to kind of think about developing is Society 4.0 through those human capabilities to really unlock the potential that's there and harness it. So our focus is very much on identifying and developing those what we call meta skills that make us uniquely human, and that's very much our focus. And like I say, so if we think about the things that Jim was referring to there in terms of enabling innovation, increasing productivity, equipping the future workforce with the skills they need, that's very much at the center of this program of work. Could we move to the next slide, please, Jim?
Apologies, Lewis. This is
it's okay. All of our rehearsal has
indeed, yeah,
gone to waste. Sorry, folks.
This seems to have frozen, I'm afraid.
Do you want to just pop back out and back in again?
Even that is beyond me. I can't escape. Oh.
There we go. So that one there. Okay, so what we've got here is a very quick potted history that tracks the evolution of meta skills since our explorations began within SDS during 2016. At the heart of the process, as we've kind of gone through over the past years, it's really been rigorous research that we've then translated into the Scottish context via various tests, evolving the process and iterating as we go. It's really about the nuance in the approach to this that really makes the difference. So testing and kind of validating different approaches is really kind of critical to what we're doing. As our thinking and sort of the models that we've been developing have kind of progressed, we've been very careful throughout that to continue testing with an international community of experts and employers through various roundtable events, case studies, and the Centre of Work-Based Learning Symposium. So making sure that we align with leading thinking in the space is very much a priority. And something that is important to make sure that we're feeding into the international agenda. And I would say we feel like we're doing a good job there, and that there is a massive and growing international kind of agreement that a focus on these human capabilities is really a critical next step for us, kind of sort of through the lens of the economy or industry or innovation or countless things that we need to be thinking about now. Next slide, please, Jim. Thank you. So if you haven't come across this before, this is Skills Development Scotland's meta skills model, and it consists of 12 meta skills captured under 3 high-level headings. Some people might call them competencies, capabilities. They might refer to them as kind of elements of mindset. There's countless sort of nomenclatures that are used to describe these things. For us, it's meta skills. And we've organized them into those 3 categories there from left to right. We've got self-management, which is really thinking about skills that are internal and intrinsic in their nature. So if we think about how change brings with it complexity and noise and distraction, then the ability to remain focused and remain on task and be able to demonstrate initiative is really critical to charting a kind of constructive course through difficult situations. As is social intelligence, then the middle category there, where we're looking at those meta skills which are more external and extrinsic in their nature, and consider how we connect with the world around us. So as the workplace evolves in terms of the global workforce or an increasingly diverse workforce, then the ability to collaborate and work across disciplines and empathize with others really helps to support an effective response. And if we think about one of the things that Jim was talking about in terms of supply chains, and that kind of the more modern sort of understanding of them as value chains, then that ability to empathize with partners across that value chain is really, really important to effectively sort of run that. And then lastly, we've got innovation, again, very important here. And that really focuses on the skills that impact on our interactions with and our identities as agents of change. So those are the meta skills that can empower us to own and to drive change, rather than perhaps falling victim to it and sort of just being dragged along by it. So that's what we've got there. Just before we move on, I think the important thing to note is while we've organized them in this very kind of neat matrix sort of model, meta skills, as you can see and as you can probably appreciate, don't exist in isolation from each other. What we've designed this to be is a toolkit of uniquely human skills that cluster in a multitude of configurations in order to support performance, resilience, innovation, effectiveness, and the ongoing and individual development of each of our apprentices. Next slide, please, Jim. Okay, we're on a roll now. Okay, so over the course of this year, we've been working hard to engage our various users and our stakeholders in order to understand their perceptions in relation to meta skills and the value that their development can offer to them. And so I thought it'd be worthwhile to share some of those with you, just to example some of the early benefits that we're encountering through the program. And in the case of employers, there's a growing body of trade publications that highlight the importance of human capabilities. In addition to, not in conflict with technical skills, but in addition to technical skills, human capabilities are kind of widely understood to be critical to effectiveness and competitiveness in this increasingly unpredictable landscape that we operate in. If I come back to the original driver for the program, which is this changing world of work, then the idea here is that while skills needs will change, while those technical skills needs will change in response to innovation and various other drivers, it's the human capabilities that will have greater endurance and resilience within that changing world. So it makes sense to increase the focus on those, proportionally within apprenticeship delivery. There's also kind of a wide recognition that markets and business models and jobs are changing fast. So capabilities that support continuous learning, innovation are all critical to adapt existing expertise and develop that resilience to change. Next slide, please, Jim. And if you can just bear with me 2 secs, folks. Sorry to dive out there, but my computer's about to die. So let me just plug it in and I'll keep going. Okay, so yeah, here we have on the next slide, we've been running a number of pilots this year to kind of explore how do we integrate meta skills into our products. And one of those is the graduate apprenticeship scheme. And what we've got here are a couple of responses on a couple of themes from our graduate apprentices. So many of the learners that we surveyed through the evaluation of these pilots have been able to appreciate the role that meta skills play in terms of their in-role effectiveness and their sort of potential for career progression. And it's really it's the sense of self that you develop through reflective practice, which is how we approach meta skills, and I'll come to that later, that really helps to build confidence and the responsibility and ownership of your development and your performance that people can carry with them as they kind of go through their career into this uncertain future. And in the second example, I really like this because both of those respondents were able to kind of easily position problem solving as a capability that's fundamental to their role. And what was interesting about it for me was that, one is coming from an early years in childcare sort of background, the other is coming from a software engineering background, but both are able to kind of really see that the criticality of that within their role. Next slide, please, Jim. And then lastly, obviously, one of our sort of key partners in addition to employers is the training provider who are essentially custodians for the work that we do and making sure that the delivery of the apprenticeship is of a high quality. So what we've discovered through our work with our provider partners is that by taking a more sort of organic and emergent approach to skills development and an individualized approach, that helps to build confidence. And one of the big things that employers say that they need from their staff is confidence. They can often provide the kind of, this is how you do the work here, but actually that kind of individual with some confidence and some initiative is really what they're looking for. So I think another really, really useful bit of learning is that learning to learn from both success and failure, or being able to discover value in yourself beyond just the academic, are both benefits that we've kind of realized through the work that we're doing on meta skills. And it's really, again, about how do we develop self-confident individuals that have that growth mindset so that they can be resilient to challenges or problems, or they have the confidence to kind of demonstrate initiative and really try and drive change and be a constructive part of the workforce. Next slides, please, Jim. So what I want to look at now is, this is how we kind of our approach to identifying meta skills within different occupations. As Jim said, I think both for NMIS and for the work that the program that I'm involved in, which is called Standards and Frameworks, and focuses on how do we develop the next sort of future forward round or sort of version of the apprenticeship, and that exists across the kind of the whole apprenticeship family. How do we really make them relevant and of value to employers and apprentices in the future? And this is sort of where I've kind of fitted in around the meta skills piece. And one of the big challenges that we have is to take, sort of quite abstract concepts like feeling, or integrity is another one that always kind of flags up, or even creativity. What we found initially was the way that we described them, it was really useful in terms of influencing policy and influencing kind of economic development agencies. But when it comes to actually, okay, how do I deal with this on the ground, and how do I actually sort of make this something that I can use in my role, there was a bit of a disconnect, and the language was maybe getting in the way. So we developed this tool, and I'm conscious that you probably will struggle to read that, but we will zoom in on aspects of it in a second. All I want to really show you here is just the kinds of insight that we're capturing to help us understand what meta skills might look like within different occupations. So in this example here, and the one that I'm going to kind of work through is just because it's a recent one, is the work that we did with the financial services sector. And the tool itself focuses on 3 data points, or 3 sort of insights. Firstly, on the left there, what we've captured are individual and instinctive definitions of these skills in the words of employees working within a particular sector. And what that does is give us, rather than our economic kind of speak, which has its place, it provides us with a user-driven language that can then be used to bring each of those skills to life and just give them context where it matters in the workplace. Then in the middle, what we've got is just a single reflective question. It's not a perfect kind of scientific question, but what it does is allow us to capture perceptions of how frequently or not employees feel that they're required to or able to use those skills in successful completion of their role. And what that allows us to do is just start to kind of build a picture of which of the meta skills are more prominent in different occupations, perhaps, than others. As you can see there, they all have a place. But there are some sort of higher scoring ones. Interestingly, across the piece, creativity always scores really low, which surprises me, but it's something that we're kind of exploring moving forward. And then lastly, on the right, we've got, in order to provide more occupational context, and context is vital for meta skills, they need to be understood in the situation in which they're being used. So in order to help us with that, we've captured examples of typical work situations where the employees feel they're using those skills, and that helps us to provide guidance on how and where to locate them in action, which, when it comes to kind of developing skills, assessing skills as part of a wider apprenticeship, you can see why that would be important. Next slides, please, Jim. So just to kind of zoom in on some of the responses, just to kind of give you an idea of some of the language. So this is providing financial services, and we're rushing through it. And in the first example, we've got integrity, where that was one of the 2 highest scoring skills within the financial services. And integrity was highlighted as being kind of useful and effective when thinking about, how do I treat my customers fairly? How do I treat my colleagues fairly? How do I make fair and objective decisions? Or how do I ensure that I'm accountable to sort of those around me? In the case of feeling, what I like is that some of the examples here really reinforce what I was saying earlier about the clustered nature and the kind of complementary sort of relationship between meta skills. This example being that awareness of both your and other people's feelings is tied to being an effective communicator. So it really just helps to really reinforce that idea that they don't exist in isolation. And then in the last example, Jim, if we can move to the next slides, please. In terms of how sense making, one of the innovation skills, would apply in context, the idea here was that when you're working on solution-focused data analysis, maybe risk management, conveying or interpreting complex ideas, all of that's helped by application of that skill. And then next slide again, please, Jim. I think what was most encouraging as we've kind of rolled this tool out as part of our apprenticeship development work with employees and employers is that 100% of the people that we worked with and invited to complete the tool were able to do so with very minimal introduction to the program around meta skills and a lot of the information that I've been talking about in this presentation. And so what we have is a 100% employee and employer derived sort of snapshot of meta skills within an occupation, and our employers on the technical expert group, who then sort of develop the wider apprenticeship, they provide it's really very much an employer-led piece of work. I think the last thing that's important to note about this is while it provides a really useful snapshot of an occupation, so that we can kind of go, okay, well, this is how meta skills might look here. What we've also observed, and this might make sense to you, is that different employees and different employers will score and value different meta skills in different ways. And that just reinforces a belief that we've got that organizational, geographic, social context, all of these kind of things that make a workplace or an organization uniquely what it is, all have an impact on the way in which meta skills are perceived. And so with that in mind, what we're not suggesting is this sort of tool that you're looking at here is a mandated profile that any apprentice needs to arrive at the end of their apprenticeship. Rather, it's a tool to support and empower a conversation at the local level around these points of insight, so that the employer and the apprentice can really define the language and the shape of meta skills within their role. And that's really important for us, is that it's individual and tailorable at the local level. Next slides, please, Jim. So what I want to finish with is just a very kind of quick, if that's possible for me, overview of how we go about, or how we're suggesting people might develop meta skills. So process is a really important word here, because essentially what we want people to focus on is the process of development rather than the outputs that it creates. It's about developing a habit of mind through habitual practice. That's what we want people to leave the apprenticeship with. So to break this down, I've considered it from three perspectives or three kind of stages: induction, on the job, and completion. At induction, what we want as the very first thing people to do is we want to establish between the apprentice and the employer a shared understanding of those meta skills as they apply in the immediate context. So exactly what I was just talking about, and sort of using the tool to do that. The profile that we've produced, we would make available to them to example, and it would ultimately be, employee and employer derived. So we're about to start work on an engineering apprenticeship development, and so the sort of, we would provide a template to those apprentices that we've derived from employees in that occupation. There's also an opportunity for the employer to have some input and agency into the process to help and steer, guide the conversation, and where they exist, potentially link existing organizational values and competencies to the meta skills, so that we're not duplicating work and we're really aligning with existing practices. And if they don't exist, then there's a scaffolding to help people do that. And then once that tool has been completed, exactly the one that I showed you in the earlier slides, we would then ask the apprentice to think about, okay, well, where do I sit right now within this? And conduct a very kind of simple self-assessment and identify some goals that they might want to carry through into the apprenticeship. What we get then at that early point is an apprentice that's been introduced to the concept of meta skills. They've been involved in the co-development of local level definitions and developing that language with their employer. They've been supported with sector-derived, employee-derived language and profiles, as we've looked at. And they've identified a development plan to help them sort of start growing their growth mindset as they move through the apprenticeship. As they move then into the job, next slide, please, Jim. During the apprenticeship, what we want is that the apprentice is engaged in various forms of reflective practice in relation to meta skills development, and that they review the progress in relation to their development plan as they go through. And that's to be done in a way that's very authentic in terms of the apprentice should be encouraged to make connections between the assessment of the wider apprenticeship and the technical skills and the various other kind of components, and linking that in with the meta skills so that they're explicit, they're embedded, and the learner is actually understanding, okay, I'm developing this toolkit, and I know how to use these things, I know where I'm developing them, and hopefully develop some confidence as a result of that. And then at the end of the apprenticeship, so they've done this initial definition, they've set a plan, they've worked on the plan, they've reflected as they go through the apprenticeship. At the end, then what we want to do is draw a line in the sand and conduct a final piece of reflective practice that helps us to understand the development that's taken place. And that's really sort of revolving around two core activities. First one is revisiting the tool that they completed at the start, the same one that I showed you earlier in the presentation, and thinking about, how has my definition of each of these skills changed? How has my understanding of where they apply in my workplace changed? And the idea would be that this would kind of happen incrementally over the apprenticeship, but they need to kind of come back to it for one last time and just reflect on how and why there's been changes or developments made. And in doing so, identify some of those skills where there has been development and provide examples from the workplace to evidence that, just to illustrate what they're saying. And the aspiration at the end of this is that the apprentice has had a very consistent, a very authentic and impactful engagement with meta skills development, and that through a reflective approach to their day-to-day role and completion of the wider qualification, they've seen increases in confidence and personal effectiveness. They've seen an increased ability to reflect on and learn from their experiences. They've developed the ability to set and review personal development goals, develop that growth mindset, and ultimately have a set of tools now at their disposal that will help them cope with change and increase performance as they move through their career. And there, thus ends my presentation. Thanks very much, folks. One thing I would just say is, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to get in touch. And I'm looking at sort of running an employer workshop to really focus in more on these skills. So if anybody would be interested in finding out more about an employer workshop around meta skills and looking at how they apply in your business, please drop me a line, because we'll be looking at kind of doing something like that over the next maybe sort of 2 to 4 weeks. So it's quite quick, I know. But yeah, thanks very much, and look forward to any questions at the end of the presentation. Thanks very much, Lewis. That was fascinating content. Apologies for the sticky fingers on the moving the slides forward. We got there. Thanks, Jim. Indeed. I'm going to give now a quick overview of the Manufacturing Skills Academy, where we are, and our relationship with some of the content that Lewis has just went through. I'm going to do it very quickly because I think it's more important that we catch up on some of the questions that have been coming through. Quick overview. Skills Academy will build on and complement the provision we already have across Scottish institutions and providers. We're not in the business of moving across anybody's patch with respect to the college provision. We have a sector attractiveness challenge around manufacturing, and we're hoping that NMIS and the Manufacturing Skills Academy will provide more of a shop front and more of a platform for us to demonstrate that advanced manufacturing is it's a clean, high-tech, high-value industry with career opportunities for people at all levels and from all backgrounds, from a diversity and inclusivity perspective. Our strategic objectives, kind of touched on that, complementing and augmenting the excellent provision already available. We want to be the leader in future manufacturing education, make sure that our offers are dynamic and leading edge. Inspire, attract and retain a diverse talent pool, and I think that's particularly important given, again, what we've just heard from Lewis, that we are in a position where we can equip the current and future workforce with the skills that they need. And that will be around doing things differently, and not only from people getting continued professional development through their employer, but also taking a personal responsibility for that. And as I touched on, offering the opportunity to show that career in digital manufacturing is valuable, and also that we also understand the skills required to meet the needs of the net zero transition, net zero carbon transition. So 5 key objectives there that I think what we're providing from our product portfolio perspective, we have an excellent chance of meeting. This is a snapshot from McKinsey Global Institute report, and it does show the movement of expected future skills needs, and this is underpinning and augmenting some of the work that Lewis has just been through. We asked Strathclyde University's business school to do us some research work on what type of curriculum we would provide in the Skills Academy and syllabus. And this came out here, and it shows that critical thinking and problem solving and communication skills will be key going forward with leadership. And interestingly, I don't know if
any of you have had the opportunity, the World Economic Forum Future of Jobs report came out in the last few days. If you look at the advanced manufacturing segment, it clearly shows, and again validates and calibrates what we've been saying here today, that those types of meta skills are going to be very important, and that input comes from businesses surveyed. So again, this is industry led. We're asking industry the questions of what type of skills do you think will be important, and we are moving towards more critical thinking, ideology, problem solving. Quickly want to run through some of the things that we've developed already from a Skills Academy perspective with respect to product portfolio. NMIS is a national asset, and it has to have a pan-Scotland approach. Certainly there will be a building in Shannon, but it's important that we have the capability to reach out far and wide with respect to content. We did some early work on the skill supply system, and we've put in place some baseline digital skills for trainers, hints and tips, short courses. That content is currently being transferred into Manufacturing Skills Academy ownership, and it will be available on our website and portals forthwith. As I touched on earlier, we have had a hard look at what our curriculum and syllabus approach would be with respect to the Skills Academy. That report was probably conducted pre-COVID, and we might need to revisit some of that clearly. We do have up and running 2 programs, one industrial doctorate program. We have 30 industrial doctorate projects in place, and it's managed by SRPE, the umbrella organisation for engineering departments within Scotland's universities. It's multi-sector, multi-tech, and it's from small and medium enterprises to large employers. And we're looking for that to be a pipeline of talent to seed advanced manufacturing going forward. Similarly, we have put in place some learning modules in digital manufacturing. Again, they were launched pre-COVID, and we're doing some work to adapt the product to make sure that it fits a post-COVID world. We're also working on a manufacturing skills 4.0 diagnostic. We've been working collaboratively with Scottish Enterprise and SMAS and Strathclyde and SDS on a holistic manufacturing skills 4.0 product. Where this is important is, and its alignment with what Lewis has just went through, is that with respect to SMAS, we have a manufacturing 4.0 diagnostic. We're looking to adapt and develop that product such that we can put in place some of the skills requirements. I think Lewis touched on, yeah, we have some of the equipment. We might need some of the skills to help us get the best benefit from that. And this offering will be around upskilling and reskilling. Again, the World Economic Forum's report suggests that the upskilling and reskilling, as we all probably know, is going to be massive with respect to the disruption that digital manufacturing will bring. And this product will be based on companies' individual manufacturing, commercial, and most importantly, their people strategies, so that we get to work with those with that meta skills tools that Lewis went through. We're looking to develop a manufacturing skills advisory group that will come from the engineering skills leadership group that's always obviously already in place. We have a global benchmarking of Skills Academies report that we are currently interrogating to make sure that we can try and get the best of the best. We need to be, as a National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland, we want to make sure we are picking up on the best learning and the most transformational approaches to manufacturing education. And then, as Lewis touched on, and I'll go into it in the next couple of slides, but in no great depth, we are currently developing our apprenticeship program in digital manufacturing. That will be across the foundation, modern and graduate apprenticeship families. It will be employer, employee and industry led through the technical expert groups, and I'll touch a little bit more on them later. And similarly, we have launched NMIS Foundation Apprenticeship in Digital Manufacturing with a number of stakeholders and partners. That's currently available for application, and again, I'll touch a little bit more on that presently. This is a very basic diagram, sort of highlighting the work that Lewis went through with respect to, from our digital manufacturing apprenticeship program, how we put meta skills at the centre, at the core of everything we're trying to do. And again, that they will be developed collaboratively between employers, employees, the training provider, to make sure we get the most additional value that we can from that. And I think Lewis touched on this already. These will be based on real workplace situations in the occupation and profession. Now, I've got this slide and I've got another one. You could do 1,000 NMIS insights on standards and frameworks of apprenticeships. It's a complex area, and I don't intend at this moment to dive into it very deeply, because I'll probably drown. But this is just to give you a sense of the approach that we're taking. So as Lewis touched on, we now have the technical expert groups are being put together for the development of these of this apprenticeship program. We have a number of people involved thus far. I think Lewis touched on the approach has been tested in previous graduate apprenticeship development, and it's shown that it meets the requirements, it meets the needs. I keep going back to the fact that this needs to be, the whole NMIS concept is around industry led. I need to make sure that we're listening to industry, and we need to make sure we're meeting their needs with respect to all of the products that we intend to offer. However, we are at the early stages of this, and the content of that apprenticeship program is, for want of a better term, up for grabs. So we would like to have as many people from the technical expert arenas and sectors involved. So if you'd like to get involved, or you'd like to know a bit more about what we're trying to do around this family, please get in touch. I touched on that we had launched the foundation apprenticeship in digital manufacturing. First of its kind. We adapted an existing product to modernise and push it toward a more digital manufacturing slant. But the key part of this foundation apprenticeship that will make it transformational is that we have a number of high value manufacturing employers in Renfrew signed on to providing placements for students in the foundation apprenticeship. Diageo, Howden Compressors, the Advanced Farming Research Centre, the Lightweight Manufacturing Centre. They are more than happy, as this course evolves, to provide the placements required. And when we do that placement, part of it, with respect to the industrial challenge, we will be utilising the tools that Lewis so eloquently described earlier to introduce younger people straight from school into the concept of meta skills and an understanding of the skills that they have and the skills that they're likely to need to develop. So we're quite excited about this, this particular start of the development of our apprenticeship program offering. That's probably me. This is a Manufacturing Skills Academy team, like a multi-faced wanted poster, but these are the people you need to contact around some of the themes that I've touched on. All skills inquiries to NMIS inquiries at strath.ac.uk. And I think that's me. So I did rattle through that because I would like to try and address some of the questions. I'm just going to go to the chat box now. See if I can pick up on some of these. I think Lewis has went back on a few. There's one there, Lewis, if you went back to that one on from Fiona, any information on how the pilot will be rolled out across GAs, and is there feedback from learning providers involved in the pilots in terms of integrating meta skills with existing frameworks, for example, learning outcomes, graduate attributes, professional accreditation, etc.
Yeah, I guess, thanks for the question, Fiona. It's a really interesting one. The answer is a long one, but what I'll try and do is just kind of cover off, I suppose, some of the kind of main sort of things that I could share. So the GAs that we've been testing in so far, there's 4 frameworks. They are software engineering, data analytics, early years and childcare, and accounting. And of those, 2 have meta skills kind of integrated into the kind of underpinning framework and standard that, so they're part of it. And with the other 2, they are kind of bolted on as kind of, retrofits into existing programs, just to kind of allow us to see how those 2 approaches work. We are also kind of, as we're expanding the work that we're doing to develop new apprenticeships, graduate apprenticeships will form part of that activity. And so what I would anticipate is that the work that we're kind of currently, I suppose, focusing on modern apprenticeship will start to kind of expand and include graduate apprenticeships. So you will see more of those products with meta skills explicitly mapped and integrated into the frameworks and documents that underpin it. As to the kind of crossover with graduate attributes, I think that's an interesting one, because it's a challenge, it's an opportunity, but it's something that also kind of applies when you think about organizational competencies or values, or sort of things that are used to conduct 360 reviews at work. So this whole thing around language nomenclature is kind of something that's a challenge. And I think we're pragmatic to think that we can't, given that every university has its own graduate attributes and every organization will have its own values and competencies, we can't sort of force our approach down people's throats. And so I think we're encouraging and trying to develop our processes so that there's the opportunity to kind of map and align, so that with the kind of intention that you're removing duplication of effort. So for example, if it's in the workplace and you're having a conversation about organizational values and competencies, is there a crossover with meta skills that can be used to kind of evidence sort of one and the other? And the same would be the case with graduate apprentices. Certainly the providers that are working with us in the kind of university space at the moment have done some of those mappings for themselves, so that they're integrating or taking a holistic approach rather than sort of treating them as separate constructs. But like I said, I could kind of have a half-hour conversation with you, and if you want to drop me an email and just chat about it in a bit more detail, then happy to do that.
Thanks for that, Lewis. I've got a question from Joanne Tate. For ENMIS, will there be opportunities for other universities with engineering schools to upskill their technical and academic staff? Joanne, I would think absolutely. As I touched on in the presentation, ENMIS is a national asset. We do have strong relationships with the SRPE. So I see no reason, Joanne, why that can't be the case.
Peter, just seeing your question here, Peter Connolly, we need to consider how to develop these skills within the senior phase. Absolutely agree. And we're already working on that as actually a kind of priority area. So a lot of the pilot work that we've done so far has been sort of in the kind of SCQF 4 and 5. And as we're moving forward now, it's kind of encompassing 6 as well. So the entire senior phase is very much a focus for us, and there's a lot of kind of drivers for that, but ultimately we're kind of expanding our product range in that space, and that coupled with the idea that the earlier you start with this stuff, meta skills wise, the more impactful you can potentially be. We have products now. I think we've a large number of kind of students going through in construction, hospitality, and automotive pathways this year, and that's looking to expand into digital in the following year. So totally agree, and there are sort of there's pieces of work already underway in that space, and so glad that you're picking up on that.
Another quick one for you, Lewis, from Sarah Danda. Hi, Sarah. Are you looking to develop any learning materials, online or not, to help employers deliver meta skills?
Yes. While ultimately the process that I've described focuses on reflective practice, and the reason for that is that before you can start developing something, you need to really understand that it's there and understand what it means to you. And so that our processes are very much focused on that at this stage. And to support that, yes, we've the tool that I showed you in the presentation is available as a template. As we're also working on sort of self-assessment tools, goal setting, action planning tools, reflective practice tools, and there's a real desire to make sure that we're empowering our partners to pick this up and sort of run with it quite quickly. And I suppose the design or the approach that we're trying to take is, if you want to just pick things up and use them verbatim, you're very welcome, and we're designing with that in mind. But if you want to just pick it up as a sort of source of inspiration and approach things then from your perspective and in a different way, then we want to make sure that there's the flexibility for that to happen as well. So yeah, definitely empowerment, but not sort of, restricting people is probably the approach we're taking. As to the availability of those tools, they're kind of in prototype sort of stage at the moment, so they will flush out as these new apprenticeships sort of come to the fore. And again, yeah, I'm sure there'll be more information about those as we kind of move through over the next kind of 6 to 12 months.
Thanks, Lewis. Another one from David Hiddleston. Hi, David. A learner achieving embedded meta skills across a course, unit, or project, will they have the meta skills developed listed on a certificate, like a learner SQA core skill profile? The example is financial services. Has this work being done, or is it planned for engineering and manufacturing sector?
Sure. So the short answer is there won't be separate certification of meta skills. They will exist within and throughout the kind of the underpinning qualification for the apprenticeship. The reason for that is sort of, I guess there's multiple reasons for that. One is that we want the learners to be explicitly aware of the tools that they're developing, and to also optimize the opportunity for individualization within that process. So we've deliberately at this point not developed sort of hard mandatory descriptors for these skills. And that's kind of the result of the thing I mentioned earlier in the presentation around how variable, their kind of perceptions of them, or the kind of the value placed in them, can be depending on so many contextual factors. So our feeling is that it's very difficult to kind of say, this is what integrity looks like in a way that's going to sort of really resonate across the piece. And so what we'd rather do is focus on what does integrity mean here, and let's work from that foundation. And so that's a very difficult thing to standardize and therefore certificate. What we are doing is we're kind of, while we want to sort of maximize the flexibility and individualization in that process, it's important that there is some way to standardize and to sort of certificate the work that's being done. And so the focus there is more so on the reflective practice and how we can orientate that within the SCQF levels. And so by virtue of having the qualification, you will have kind of, a recognition of meta skills, but not in that same way that core skills would have done traditionally.
Thanks, Lewis. Probably maybe one of the last ones. I don't know if you touched on this. I think you've touched on the answer already, but there's one from Peter Connolly around who makes the final decision on the assessment of meta skills.
Yeah, it's probably a good segue from the last question.
Yep.
I guess it's not that we're not assessing meta skills, but we're not assessing the meta skills. So we're not saying, okay, you've now got your integrity at level 6. Yeah. What we're saying is, what we can assess is, has this person engaged in a consistent process throughout the apprenticeship in which they've kind of used meta skills as a stimuli for performance-focused reflective practice. And so we can kind of assess, are the outputs of that process, evidence that this has been authentic, that it's been consistent, that it's not just something that's bookended, the apprenticeship in a very superficial way, but it's something that's actually being used to manage performance and increase performance and confidence. So the decision is ultimately in the same way. There's an assessor, there's external verifiers, but what they're assessing and externally verifying is the quality of the process rather than the outputs that it's creating or the artifacts around the kind of specific meta skills. I hope that's clear and helpful.
Thanks, Lewis. I think it is. I think, to be fair, I think you've answered all those questions with aplomb. It's important we keep the conversation going around this to keep everybody involved. As the marketing people have put on the chat there, feel free to contact Lewis or myself, if you've anything else you'd like to discuss around the themes of the questions. We're more than delighted to be collaborative around that. As I've said before, NMIS is a national asset, and we have many clever people with lots of good intention and good opinion and good insight to what we're trying to do. And it'd be really useful to get everybody on board. So I think if Laura and Debbie are okay with that, I think we're a couple of minutes early, but that's not too bad. It's been a pleasure to speak to you, and I think Lewis in particular has done a fantastic job there outlining meta skills and their importance for us all going forward.
Thanks for having me, folks. Thanks, Jim.
That's great. Thanks very much, Jim. Thanks to both of you, Lewis and Jim, for very informative presentations today. Thanks everyone for joining us for this NMIS Insights webinar. So I'll just be bringing it to a close in a few moments. You will receive a survey after the webinar has closed, and we would appreciate if you could take a few moments to return this feedback to us. It does help us shape future webinars. Our next one will be on Wednesday, the 4th of November.